Lord, I pray for your guidance, for your Spirit to give order and shape to the words that I speak, to fill them with your meaning and your presence, to touch each of us with your truth. Lord, what I offer to you, I pray, is pleasing to you, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Our Advent series, in some ways, could be kind of summed up as the answering of those basic questions. When, where, who, how, why. Last week, we talked about the when. Prophet Jeremiah told us, surely the day is coming. The days are here when this will happen. We know it's about to be. That's the when. This week, it's the where. And we have the prophet Micah, who starts right out saying, in Bethlehem, this least, the less, the most insubstantial, insignificant clan of Judah, this place is where it's going to happen. And then Micah goes on and talks about this one who will rise up and will care for the people, shepherd the people, feed the people, give them a place to dwell in security, because the people that Micah was talking to were not feeling secure, were not feeling safe, were having their resources stretched so thin. The northern kingdom had fallen. There were refugees flooding down south, and people were stressed and concerned and worried, and they wanted to hear about one who's going to rise up, who is going to rule and take over. And I'm sure in their imagination they expected some army to come forth. They wanted security. They wanted to know they were going to be taken care of. But I also imagine they didn't jump right to that part of what Micah was saying. They maybe stumbled right at the very beginning when he says, oh, you, Bethlehem. Yes, you. Now, we don't hear that the same way. After all, we know about Bethlehem. This time of year, Advent and Christmas time, Bethlehem shows up in lots of verses. We even have a well-known Christmas carol that says, oh, little town of Bethlehem. We know all about Bethlehem. But the people that Micah was talking to, Bethlehem wasn't anything special. It was just a little town. And in that time, most of the little villages were way less than 1,000 people, sometimes way less, way less. You couldn't expect all these people that are hearing this prophecy to have any significance for Bethlehem at all. Now, I confess, I am a small town girl. I was born in a small town. Wow, now I have that song in my head. I'm trying to get rid of it. Okay, I was raised in a small town. Most of the churches I've served, in fact, every church I've served has been in a small or smaller town. I get it. And I know when you are from a small town and you talk to people that don't know where you're from and they ask you and you say the name of your town, you will get that very polite, oh, mm-hmm. And you can tell they have no idea where you're from. So you begin giving qualifiers like, oh yeah, it's 35 miles southwest from Lincoln, Nebraska. You know where Lincoln is? Oh, okay, I know that area. Or now I say, I'm from Winona, and I get that same look. I say, it's in the southeast corner of Minnesota, right on the Mississippi River. Oh, okay. We have to lift ourselves up when you're from a small town. People somehow don't expect anything significant to come from small towns. And so they don't pay attention. And how could they? There are so many small towns. I actually was doing a quick search, and there's towns with less than 100 people in every single state in our union, sometimes multiple. And for many years, there was one town that made all sorts of news. It's not the only town this size, but it caught a lot of attention because it pointed to a discrepancy in the census. But it's a town from my home state of Nebraska that has a total population of 1. She is the mayor and the postmaster, and she runs the grocery store, and she also runs the tavern. Why they have all those things in a town with a population of 1, I assume it's to take care of the farm families around. I don't know. But we would never have heard about that little town in Nebraska, if it hadn't made the news for something unusual, like the fact that the census messed up and doubled their numbers because they didn't count them correctly. So it made the news for a few years. Now, when you hear of little towns in certain places, they somehow seem more exotic than if you talk about Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota. When you talk about little towns in California, well, that seems exotic. And somehow you would expect that people that live in California are all somehow involved in the entertainment industry. It is not true. But we have kind of that. They're either making California wines or they're in the entertainment industry. Or you can hear about towns right outside New York City, and you know where that is, and you're all thinking, oh, New York, well, that's the big powerhouse. There must be rich people and people on Wall Street and obviously Broadway. We expect things to come out of those places. Sometimes we even expect things to come up out of, the upper crust of the East Coast. Somehow we expect politicians to come from there, and deep thinkers and great philosophers, because we have Harvard and Yale and Princeton and all that. Those places, we expect things to come from. But would you ever expect anyone important or significant or famous to come from a place called Broken Arrow? No, of course you wouldn't. And yet, out of this tiny little town in Oklahoma, there was someone who grew up there, was raised there, went to the University of Oklahoma, ended up becoming an incredible performer. Has won Tony Awards, Emmy Awards, Theater's Choice Awards, Film Critics Awards, has done this in a phenomenal way. And I've been thinking about her a lot lately because we went and saw the movie Wicked, and she was the one that originated the show on the role of Glenda on Broadway. It's Kristen Chenoweth from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. When we talk about Bethlehem, we can lose sight that it was considered less than less. It was considered the backwoods of beyond, because we know the other side of the story. But we're asked in our Advent journey to pause for a moment and think about what waiting and watching in Bethlehem looks like. We're not watching for some massive private jet to come flying in on the non-existent runway and someone powerful to step up and change the world. If we're truly watching in Bethlehem, we're watching our neighbors and the people we know, the people we see on the street, the people who are like us, just ordinary people living lives in all the different ways those lives are shaped. Watching in Bethlehem means we expect, out of humble origins, that God is doing something right now. Because, let's think about it. Bethlehem, that's where Ruth went to glean the wheat, where she married Boaz. That's where David watched over the sheep. That's where the Christ child is born. Not in some famous place, not on some magnificent stage or anything like that, in a stable, in the little town that belongs to the least of the clans. Watching in Bethlehem means that we expect, we trust, we know that God will meet us wherever we are, whatever we're facing. God, Emmanuel, God with us, is truly with us. And all the people say, amen.